Hi, everyone. Glad that we all can make it here. So I'm just going to offer a little land acknowledgement. Bear with me. Um, so I'd like to acknowledge that I am situated on the traditional lands and waters of the Petun, the Wendat peoples, and the Anishinaabeg and the Haudenosaunee Confederacies, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River and the Chippewa. We acknowledge all who came before us and have traveled and stewarded the lands and waters of this territory. Today, Toronto is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island and beyond, and we are grateful to live and work in this community on this territory. Miigwech masi. I'm Tash. I'll just introduce myself and then I'll hand it over to the next speaker. I am the grants manager for the Indigenous Arts Projects program at the Toronto Arts Council. I am also an artist. I am a multimedia artist and also have done a few public art artworks and presentations. I'm Dene, sorry, I forgot my nation. I'm Dene and Eastern European. I was raised in Matagami First Nation, which is Anishinaabe territory, with my Anishinaabe father and my mother. I've been with the TAC for a year and happy to be here. And so I'll hand it over to Camille.
Awesome. Hi. So I'm Camille Georgeson Usher. I'm also based in Toronto. I've lived here for, I guess, almost 4 years now, and I'm loving it. But I am originally from Galiano Island, BC, and on my grandfather's side, we're Coast Salish from many nations, but predominantly the Squamish Nation. And my grandmother is from Aklavik in the Northwest Territories, and on her side, we're Dene. That side of my family moved around a lot, so not really connected to the Northwest Territories so much anymore. But I moved to Montreal in 2010 to do my undergrad and my master's, and it was when I was there that I really started kind of my artistic practice as a public artist, just recognizing that there was nothing that I could see reflected from my personal indigeneity in the city of Montreal. And then I just started meeting with many other Indigenous women in Montreal who felt the same and felt that we needed to do something to create moments where we could see ourselves in the city. And so we created a group where we just get together and we would bike and we would bead and we would put stuff up around Montreal. And then this kind of developed into a more robust public art, like a real public art practice, because I just saw how it can change people's lives to see themselves reflected in the city. And so I've done a few pieces, but outside of that, I'm also the executive director of the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, which doesn't leave me a lot of time to be an artist, but you know, I try to make time sometimes. But that's my introduction. And then I think Julie is next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Negum. I'm coming from you live from Treaty 1 territory in the homeland and the heartland of the Métis Nation. We are situated as the heart of Turtle Island. I'm always excited to express that. This is my home. This is where my family is from. And I'm Canada Research Chair at the University of Winnipeg in Indigenous Arts, Collaboration, and Digital Media. We're in the process of building an Indigenous Media Lab in a collaborative space. Also the lucky person who gets the artistic direction of Nuit Blanche, which is for 2020 and 2021, and it is North America's largest public exhibition, and we're going to talk lots more about it. I'm also, outside of being a scholar, I'm also an artist, and I have also done a lot of kind of, I guess, large-scale curatorial projects, and I've been a curator of public art and then also a creator of public art. And that's me.
I'm Jean Holmes. I'm from the programming team in City Cultural Events at the City of Toronto. I am a settler heritage, Scottish-Irish, and an accomplice and an ally. I'm calling in today from the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe Nation up in and around Southampton and Port Elgin, Ontario. It's the traditional territories of the people of three fires, known as the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and is now stewarded by the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation as the traditional keepers of the land. I'm representing sort of all the city pieces around information sharing today. As Julie mentioned, the Year of Public Art, and as Julie mentioned Nuit Blanche, but I'll also talk a little bit about ArtworxTO, which is Toronto's Year of Public Art in 2021, and a little bit of a high-level discussion around the 10-year public art strategy. The team that I work on produces a number of projects, including Nuit Blanche, all of which seem to be kind of in holding patterns now until we kind of move through the next stages of gatherings and coming back together in public ways, which we can hardly wait for, I think.
My name is Erica Hennebury, Strategic Programs Manager at the Toronto Arts Council. I'm a settler here, an invited guest here from these territories, and I come from Jabugtug, from the Mi'kma'ki, Wabanaki territories. I am here today to just tell you a little bit about the Animating Toronto Streets grants program, to just offer that resource as a contribution to this conversation about public art. Thanks.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Rupal Shah, also a Strategic Programs Manager at TAC, and here to talk about an opportunity for public art funding through the Open Door program, which is one of the several programs that I manage together with Erica.
There are a number of programs that we're going to talk about today that are granting programs. There is the new partnerships grant that has been created in through the City of Toronto as part of the Toronto Public Art Strategy. The city, so I'll take a step back. The city has developed over the last 2 years a new public art strategy that will be implemented beginning in 2021. It is a new sort of revisioning of the creativity and community, and has 21 actions in it, which I'm not going to explain to you today because all of that is available online. But the underpinning ideas around all of those actions is commitment to advancing truth and reconciliation with Indigenous communities through public art. And the official plan recognizes the value of public art in contributing to the city's identity and character, and in celebrating the cultural diversity and creativities of communities. So all of those things are really captured in the strategies around the 10-year public art plan for the city. It covers a lot of different elements, including relationships with the existing public art collection, both in outdoor spaces as well as the interior collections that are more wall-based or interior projects. Then in addition to that, it captures the sort of ideas around programmings related to temporary public art and commissioning of new works and a number of other elements. Our plan, I think, is that the new public art opportunities will support a diversity of artists and also act as a catalyst to create sort of meaningful civic engagement for Torontonians. So that there are a lot of aspirational goals set out, but they are really at the foundation of the plan is about investing in new creative opportunities for artists, which I think is primarily what we're talking about today. I don't know if anybody saw the great column that Michelle Pearson-Clark, who is Toronto's photo laureate, wrote in the Star this week, but she's also a member of the External Advisory Committee for the Year of Public Art. And she said that in such a great way that the new strategies also embrace the temporary and the art that is not just large sculptures. So I think ideas behind, in particular, the Year of Public Art strategy is about encouraging artists to apply to the programming opportunities who don't necessarily have an experience or an understanding or a background in public art. So Michelle, as a photographer, is really reaching out to photographers to encourage them to participate, but there are lots of opportunities that might not necessarily be imagined as public art that could potentially be incorporated into the new 10-year strategy, and also specifically into the 21 Toronto Year of Public Art, which has just been rebranded as ArtworxTO. So to shift to Year of Public Art from the 10-year strategy, it's really the kickoff for the sort of next 10 years around public art in the city of Toronto. It's a renewed commitment to public art. It's a partnership with existing city public art strategies, but also with external partners and external organizations and artists to sort of create this umbrella of activity and focus on public art and public art practice through 2021. There is a lot of information on the City of Toronto website, which is going to go into the chat, so you can find the links really easily. The key pillar for ArtworxTO or for the Year of Public Art is to build strong partnerships with the city's artists and arts organizations. And the city is committed to supporting and bolstering the activity and talent already at work. So they are awarding partnership grants to support and subsidize projects that might be in development or ideas that might need seed money to be created. The ArtworxTO partnership grant has $100,000 of funds to distribute out into the community. And that application process is available online in the ArtworxTO website now. I'm happy to answer any specific questions about that, so I don't think I'll go too deeply into that. The key for it, however, is to get as much funding out into the community as possible. So it isn't, the key part of ArtworxTO is that it isn't actually going to be producing work, but we'll partner with organizations and artists who are. So that's a pretty important element around this Year of Public Art strategies. Included in the Year of Public Art strategies is Nuit Blanche Toronto, and Julie will talk a little bit more specifically about Nuit Blanche, but the dates for the 21 Nuit Blanche have been set. It's October 2nd in 21, but we're doing online programming for Nuit Blanche on October 3rd. And there are 2 funds that are available at the Toronto Arts Council right now through the Animating Toronto Streets program. That, Erica, do you want me to talk about that, or are you going to talk about that?
I will get to it, but I will talk about it very briefly. But if you want to talk about your sort of side of the partnership of that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So the Animating Toronto Streets partnership with the Toronto Arts Council is a fund of for artists to apply to that is specifically around creating work in the right of way. So the fund is created from monies that developers pay called hoarding tax. So we like to think about that money as going back onto the street, in some cases quite literally. So for the night of Nuit Blanche, we do a lot of street closures, and projects end up on roads, on sidewalks, on bridges, on hoarding, on underpasses, those sorts of things that will be part of the in real life programming in 2021. All of the projects that we had invited to participate in Nuit Blanche 2020 have been moved into 2021. So it'll be a big sort of spreading across the city program idea. And then in addition to that, there is an Animating Toronto Streets fund that is specifically for ArtworxTO. And that fund is for projects that have about a longer footprint than the night of Nuit Blanche, ideally a month, that will be present and available for the citizens of the City of Toronto to see in different ways. And there's a lot of ways to interpret the right of way. I think, the easiest obviously is a mural, but I think that the Year of Public Art strategy is really also trying to focus on embracing other kinds of opportunities. So whether it's performance, or whether it's projection, or whether it's a different interpretation of what could happen on the right of way, that is something that isn't just the sort of that two-dimensional And Julie, maybe I'll pass over to you to talk about Nuit Blanche specifically, because I feel like I'm rambling slightly.
Sure. Yes, I can talk a little bit about Nuit Blanche. We're excited this year. We have I have a fly in my studio, which is making me a little bit crazy. I feel like it's this new thing that's just following me around every time I'm on Zoom. Anyways, outside of that, we have a 2-year curatorial theme called The Space Between Us. It's looking at connections between North America, Pacific, Circumpolar, and what draws us together in terms of like how we relate to place, what are those stories of place, how do we come together, how are we different, and the concept is that luckily I had ended up picking a two-year curatorial theme without knowing that there would be a global pandemic. And also too, it takes on a new connotation, the space between us, as we continue to social distance and be safe in our physical spaces. So I think that there's going to be some interesting things that come out of that curatorial theme. We have a process of independent projects. The TAC funded, what do we just call them? You guys are gonna laugh at me. My brain's just going blank. It's Friday. Animating Toronto Streets. I knew that. And so then, and so those are 2 opportunities that artists can apply for direct participation within Nuit Blanche. And independent projects, you can apply directly to the City of Toronto, but then you can also apply for additional funding through Toronto Arts Council or Ontario Arts Council or Canada Council. And so to augment or supplement your existing projects. So I think that's important to understand with independent projects. And then the Animating Toronto Streets is a much more robust, larger fund of money. And so, you know, the opportunity is really great in terms of you can do a much larger scale project in a relationship to the right of way. I don't know what else I should say here, but I feel like I can come back at some point. But I just yeah, I think that it's important to kind of consider the opportunities that we have. The other thing I would say about the Year of Public Art, or under its new rubric, we're working very closely. So Nuit Blanche and that year is also working very closely together. So sometimes there's some nice overlap in some of those projects, and we're trying to make sure that we get the most exposure for all those artists moving forward. So.
Shall I talk about Animating Toronto Streets? Yeah, just a little bit of high-level info about that program. So this is a TAC Grants program, and it's part of TAC's strategic programs sort of envelope of fund. We basically have 2 envelopes of grants. One is your sort of traditional arts discipline grants, so you know, project funding and operating funding in the arts disciplines like theater, music, dance, community arts, Indigenous arts is part of that as well, and so on. And then we have this newer sort of envelope of funding called strategic programs, and that's what Rupal and I both manage together. We each have a portfolio of a number of strategic programs that we do. So you can actually, as an individual artist, as a collective, or as an organization, you can actually have a grant in each of these categories. So you could have an Indigenous Arts project grant, and you could also apply for Animating Toronto Streets to do a project either in Nuit Blanche or Year of Public Art. So essentially, the Animating Toronto Streets program is open to individual artists, to nonprofit arts organizations, and to artist collectives. So it's very open in terms of who can apply. The projects have to be free. Anything that happens has to be free and open to the public, so no admission can be charged. It has to be accessible, and the projects themselves have to be AODA compliant, and so, you know, that means they're barrier-free, physically accessible projects. They have to take place in the public right of way, as Jean mentioned, and that's because of the bylaws associated with the way that construction sign hoarding tax is derived. And then there are two categories that you can apply under, and one is for projects as part of Nuit Blanche, and one is for projects as part of ArtworxTO. And a couple of the questions we get a lot are, can I apply for both? The answer is no, you have to choose. Sometimes artists are part of multiple collectives, and that could be okay, but know that you're competing against yourself if you're putting your name in as part of two different applications. So it's going to be a competitive pool, particularly for the Animating Toronto Streets, because the projects scale, they're quite big. They're grants of up to $50,000, and for Nuit Blanche, they're pretty big too. You can get up to $20,000 to do a Nuit Blanche project, which is a decent, a substantial project budget for a 12-hour project. And it's fine if you want to apply, and this can be 100% of your budget. You don't need to go and get other sources of revenue. It's totally fine if this is 100%. I think those are the questions that we normally get. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. And I'm going to be hanging around this call for the next little while if anybody has follow-up questions about that. So I'm going to pass it on to Rupal to talk about Open Door.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I will also talk from a pretty high level about Open Door. So Open Door is also a strategic program, but unlike Erica's program, is open to organizations and artist collectives only and not to individuals. It's also not formally or officially part of ArtworxTO, but the reason that I'm here to talk about it is that you can apply with a public art project to Open Door. There are 3 project categories within Open Door, and one of them is called Big Ideas, which is specifically for conferences, large artist gatherings, as well as public art performances or interventions, or basically any form of public art can come to the Big Ideas project grant at Open Door. Again, not an official part of ArtworxTO the way that Animating Toronto Streets is, but an option for you if you're interested in applying for funding for your public art project, whether it takes place during 2021 or not.
So should I, I'll tell you a little bit about the Indigenous Arts program. So yeah, it's in terms of projects that are intended for public spaces, which is essentially why we're all here. The Indigenous Arts program can definitely be a place to look for funding if you're a Toronto-based Indigenous artist or collective, or artistically led by an Indigenous person organization and primarily for Indigenous artists. This program has a number of categories. We have 4. We have a project development category, which is a maximum of $3,000. And it's essentially for that. So you're at the beginning stages of a project idea and you're looking to develop the idea and make connections and do research, form your methodology, that sort of thing. We have a creation category that's a maximum of $10,000. Exhibition dissemination, which is $15,000 max, and an Indigenous Arts Sector Development grant, which is also a max of $15,000. The program funds projects from any discipline, as long as the project isn't of a commercial nature. An example of a couple of the projects from categories that I can offer that fit within the public realm is the first ever Toronto Indigenous Folk Festival. So that was a exhibition presentation. The Indigenous Arts Sector Development Grant, there was also a collective that was funded to do hide tanning in parks as part of to support their residency with Artscape Gibraltar Point. And so an audience would be invited to come and watch them actually tan hide, and take the audience through the whole process, like do it on a daily basis until it was done, so that it's sort of a living installation. So those are just a few examples of public works that have been funded by this program. Yeah, and it's a rolling deadline, so you can apply anytime between something like January 2nd each year to November 4th. Please reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about my program. Yeah.
Yeah, also, we do have our, last week we had an information session about Year of Public Art that was a little bit more thorough about all the programs that you can apply for. That's on our YouTube page and our Instagram channel. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
And don't
Thank
hesitate to
you.
reach out individually if you have any questions about anything.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.